Next, let's move on to our panel discussion, and it is the first panel discussion of the day on the adoption of cryptocurrencies across Africa. And your moderator for the panel, Alex Pryor, Head of Digital Innovation at DOH, who will introduce her panel. Will you? Good.
Great. Hi there, everyone. The mic is working, and that's fabulous. Before I introduce my fabulous panel, I've just got a few questions for you guys. So firstly, I would like anyone in the audience to stand up if you've ever wondered why it takes at least 1 day to do an interbank transfer. If you've ever wondered that, stand up. Nobody's wondered. Ooh. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Has anyone ever wondered? No, don't sit down. Stand back up. Keep standing. Keep standing. If you have to stand up, you've got to stay standing. Next question. Has anyone ever wondered why you can't carry an electronic bank payment on a Sunday? I wondered that. Okay, we've got a lot of people who haven't wondered. Has anyone ever wondered why it costs so much to send money overseas? There we go. We've got some more people. Yeah. Okay, so we've got about half the room, which means that the rest of you are either in banking or you keep all your money under the mattress. But for today, guys, you may now sit down. Thank you very, very much. Also, welcome to move a little bit closer. We do have a few gaps in the audience, but hopefully we've got a very big group online. But I have 4 fabulous gentlemen here on the panel with me today to discuss the adoption of cryptocurrencies in Africa. So first, and in no particular order, I have Kevin Imani, the CEO of Nia Kenya, and the founder and CEO of Sankore 2.0. That's him running up. I deliberately chose you because you were at the back. Sankore, if you were here earlier, they're on a mission to empower the youth in Africa to become tech leaders. And he also spoke at Davos at the World Economic Forum this year. So very, very impressive guy. Next, we have Dr. Felix Macharia, who is the founder and CEO of Kotani Pay, which is very cool. It lets you connect businesses with users who just have regular old-fashioned cell phones, not smartphones, and basically have fiat on-ramps and off-ramps, even through technology like USSD, which is where you type, *123#. So Felix's company is doing amazing things there to connect people who don't have smartphones. Next, we have the recovering financiers. First, we have a recovering banker. He's from a little-known centralized exchange. It's fine if you guys haven't heard of it. They haven't been around that long. And before that, he had 22 years of experience with HSBC. So I'd like you to welcome Wessels, the head of Binance South Africa. Oh, come on, Michael. We need claps for them as well. And last but certainly not least, we have the general manager of Luno South Africa. If you're from Cape Town, you're very used to seeing the Luno building. He is a recovering chartered accountant, and it is his mission to upgrade the world to a better financial system. So, gentlemen, I'm thrilled to have you here today. Early warning is that the gentleman from the unknown centralized exchange may have to disappear off stage a little bit early. Unfortunately, he has a plane to catch, and when you don't have very many customers, you've got to be able to get to every client meeting you can. But to really get in and begin with this, and I got so excited for this panel this week because obviously last week, Silicon Valley Bank went under, collapsed, run on the bank, no more money, $1 billion worth of debt. Now, last year, FTX, a crypto exchange, also went belly up for slightly different reasons. But I'm going to start with Marius and ask, how do you think this impact of a regular bank going under is going to impact the crypto industry and the crypto adoption, both in Africa and globally?
Well, I think in the short run, I think the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the root cause of what happened there, I think definitely strengthens Bitcoin's appeal as a decentralized store of value. We have seen the Bitcoin price move in the short run, a couple of percentage points. I don't think that really is an indication of the fact that, everyone now moved their funds from banks to crypto. I think it's pure speculation. But I think the big underlying issue here is custody, right? It has to do with are you able to trust the company that you place your funds with, whether it's fiat currency, whether it's cryptocurrency. What makes cryptocurrency unique is the optionality, right? So you can decide to use an exchange that stores your crypto one-to-one, or if you have enough confidence, in your ability to do self-custody, you can move your cryptocurrency off an exchange to your hardware wallet. And that's really powerful. I think that is really the definition of, putting the power of crypto in people's hands. So our role at Luno is really to enable our customers to make the best decision for themselves at that specific moment in time, to decide whether they want to trust Luno with the crypto or whether they want to move the cryptocurrency to take self-custody. And it's unique, right? If you think about it, you don't have an option to self-custody your equities or your digital rands of dollars, right? You don't have that option. So that's really powerful stuff. So I think Bitcoin specifically is appeal as a decentralized store of value has been strengthened over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to ask Felix the next question. Hannes, don't worry, I'm coming to you. I know you might have to disappear. So Felix, your business deals a lot with stable coins and the payment of stable coins. And what we saw from the Silicon Valley Bank fallout was what we call a depegging of a stable currency. Now, a stable currency or a stable coin is backed by theoretically real reserves of money. We won't get into Terra, it's okay. Or into, what are they called? USDT, Tether. But what we saw was that instead of having a one-to-one of dollars last week, we saw USDC, one of the US stable coins, fall to 88 cents. So it was no longer pegged. Does this not expose a fundamental flaw in the system for stable coins? And given that Africa has been looking at stable coins as potential alternate tender, how does this affect that?
Okay, so definitely stable coins as assets carry risks. All assets do carry risks, and it's a matter of balancing between assets that have high risk and those that are risk. So even if you look at stable coins, we have fiat-backed stable coins and algorithmic stablecoins. Fiat-backed ones, of course, are under risks within the banking system, whatever banking system that is. So if I, for example, I'm pegging my stablecoin to the US dollar, risk within the US financial system will most likely have an effect on that. And that's what we saw with Circle. They had $3.3 billion in SVB. Part of their money was stuck there. People were not sure whether they could still support the peg, which is that you have off-chain assets that are supporting the on-chain assets. Algorithmic stablecoins tend to be riskier, and a lot of the risks there are technology, cybersecurity risks. I think we have seen a lot of hacks in DeFi, and only about 7% of that money has been recovered. So risks just depend on the underlying structure of the particular stablecoin. Stablecoins are not essentially stable because they actually depend on a reserve of assets to maintain their stability.
Okay. And then moving on to Hannes. So your former employer actually bought out Silicon Valley Bank, which is presumably great news for all the VCs who had their money invested there. But in general, what we see is what happens in the US affects us here. Why is that? Why should what the Fed is doing with their interest rates affect what's happening with the crypto price and affect what's happening with us here in Africa with our own currencies?
If you look at what Circle did with their collateral, they did the right thing. They spread it around a number of banks. I think there were about 10 or 12 banks. And that's a very good strategy until one of those goes bust. Then if you have 10%, your stablecoin then depegs by 10%, and that's exactly what happened. That's when the Fed stepped in, they made the SVB deposit holders whole, and it went back to par. But it just demonstrates the risk. Now you can look at it glass half full, glass half empty, and say, well, if they had all the collateral with one institution and that went bust, you lost everything, and that takes you to a Luno scenario. So it's still not good if you lose 10% of something that's got to be on par with the dollar, but at least it shows you there was a bit of, can I say, collateral liquidity risk management evident there. How does it impact us here? Well, to your point, stablecoins are the transacting currency or mechanism in a lot of African countries where there's not enough liquidity to get your hands into US dollars. I think a country like Nigeria is a good example where there's just not always access to our currency, be that dollars, be that sterling, be that euro. So then Tether or BUSD or USDC becomes your transacting mechanism. And if that depegs, through no fault of anybody in those countries, you lose 10% of your value.
Absolutely. So, okay, you can hear me with this, great. So next going to go on to Kevin, and then we'll start moving on to some more open questions for everyone. So Kevin, my question is this. When we look at cryptocurrency adoption in Africa, we have had, and I know I'm asking you because I know you know one of the founders, we have had M-Pesa in Africa since 2007. So for 2 years longer than Bitcoin has been alive. So Africans are used to mobile money. We're used to using our cell phones to pay things. How do you think the fact that we already have a technology that is mobile money is going to assist or detract from the adoption of cryptocurrency by your average population in Africa?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Alex. I certainly think it will assist. I think the mobile money penetration has shown that in Africa we have an ability to implement technologies without having traditional primitive steps for it. So we've managed to implement smartphones and cellular data without PC having to be fully established. Most youth don't necessarily have their own personal computers, but they do know how to manipulate and navigate a smartphone device. And so the fact, as you mentioned, 2 years before Bitcoin came around, we were already sending money through SMS. So the mass adoption is certainly, I think, this place is quite ideal for it. But kind of going back to what was said already, custody, Marius talked about this, very important. Stablecoins tend to be not as stable as we predict or want to, but it's still very important. And I think the larger concept for us to kind of think about as well is there's definitely massive FUD. And that's been around for a long time. It's not a new conversation of, investors pulled out all their money and now there's no more money in the bank. These things can be prevented. I think we need to be more, I think some of the stable coins probably needs to be more open and transparent in terms of their fiat reserve, be less cagey about it, because most people still don't really know what's going on inside. And so we can't really know what insurances are in place for such things to happen, because we need to have stable coins. It's very important. And yeah, I think we're a long way from getting there, but I think mobile money and M-Pesa are definitely testimonies to show that the mass adoption can happen, and that can be assisted by Amazon.
Perfect. And then now onto the open question. So you guys can shout out your answers or just put up your hand and say me. And the first I'm going to ask, because we had talks about it this morning, both from the Reserve Bank and then looking at CBDCs or central bank digital currencies, aka digital cash that is backed up by a country's reserve bank. Are they competition for crypto, or are they going to live next to it in the ecosystem? What do you guys think? Hannes.
I'll go first. I think there's always room for parallel rail. There's a lot of fears around CBDCs. Can it be switched off? Can it be taken away? Can it be taken out of your account? I think to be seen. But for me, there's something between the current stablecoin construct and what we think CBDCs to be. I think somewhere in the middle there's that sweet spot where we can get something that's hopefully backed by a central bank, but not collateralized to the extent we see the stablecoins now, because again, that's where we see some of the misgivings. So I think there's something in the middle there.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else? Marius?
Yeah, I think
Next.
I agree with Hannes. I think you'll probably see a hybrid environment where we know that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin drive financial services to a more decentralized state. I think it's unlikely that we will live in a fully decentralized world in the next decade or two, right? And I also think a couple of key forces. One is trust. People will always have a need to trust a central party or a central company to safeguard their funds or to issue their funds. And also the competitive forces, of the market. So will also result, and we've seen that central banks bringing out their own versions of a cryptocurrency or form of cryptocurrency. So I think we will see purely decentralized cryptocurrencies and then centralized CBDCs live together. I think it's a positive. There's some level of acknowledgement, I think, from a central bank perspective that the way in which you currently use money and the way in which people want to use money isn't that optimal at this point. And I think there's alignment among cryptocurrency exchanges, fintech companies, regulators, that the way people think about and use money is changing, right? So I think it's an acknowledgement to say, listen, we need to innovate, we need to continue to make it easier, cheaper for the public to use money. So I think that's good in itself. I think if we only achieve that, then I think it would have been successful.
Okay, perfect. And Felix, your view?
Yeah, just to add on that, I think when people talk about BDCs, there tends to be two camps. One is one extreme where governments won't allow any other currencies apart from CBDCs. That extreme where CBDCs will completely fail. And in actual fact, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. It's usually a spectrum. So quite possibly CBDCs would do well as retail CBDCs for obvious reasons. There's no, at least on the banking side, reason to back them if you're a bank, or if you're a fintech. And we've seen that even with the e-Naira, the adoption for that has been quite low. Retail CBDCs. Wholesale CBDCs, however, have massive value, I think, in the case of, bank-to-bank kind of transactions, or transactions with very big holders. The recent run on SVB is a clear lesson that, we probably need, at least for the crypto ecosystem, we can benefit from an anchor liquidity partner. So one of the things they're doing in Europe with MiCA is they're trying to regulate stablecoins and crypto asset related tokens. But basically what we'll have is you'll have the euro dollar that's acting as an anchor liquidity partner, then connecting to all these stablecoin issuers that have been licensed, at least in the case of.
And I think you raise a good point there in terms of retail adoption, people aren't going to do it until it's easy. Now, we saw the Pick and Pay presentation by Carl yesterday, which was amazing. And it's very easy to do once you know how to do it. I was chatting to someone else here who said that they went to Pick and Pay and said, I want to pay with Bitcoin. And the person's eyes got this big because the public didn't realize they had to say, I want to pay by QR code. So there's obviously still sort of that education that needs to happen before we can get mass adoption across the continent. Maybe Kevin, because you've only spoken once, but then to the rest of you as well. How do you feel that the systems need to change to make it easy for people to interact with a digital currency? Do we need a new M-Pesa? Do we need M-Pesa to become a cryptocurrency? Or do we need an entirely new system?
That's a fantastic question. Very good question. It's probably a very diplomatic answer to that. There's definitely a little bit of all of that. And I wanted to maybe answer this question by responding a little bit what Felix mentioned, which is a good point. The way I kind of see things happening, I might be wrong, I'm not totally true, but as more foreign blockchains come to Africa, governments are going to look at different ways to protect their interests, and that is also to be able to provide a centralized way to get more and more people within the financial system. Right? So there's a lot of people who are not part of the financial system, and they know that, and they'll look at ways to do that. Now, yes, depending how you look at it, it'd be a good thing, bad thing, but it's not the solution necessarily to have mass onboarding of people within crypto, because then the question is, what are they going to be doing after that, or what's the experience going to be like? It's very different to work with a government-backed, centralized platform as opposed to, say another respective decentralized platform. So I think we're going to have a balance. It will be very important to reduce the gap between government and innovators, because they themselves will look at, can we collaborate, can we work together to make sure that people within our nation can also be part of this centralized, or at least part of this financial kind of platform. So there's going to have to be a lot of conversation. We're definitely nowhere close there because there's a long road to it. So yeah, I can see, platforms trying to provide a similar feel like M-Pesa on chain. But I can also see governments running their own race, learn from their past mistakes and look at how they can protect their interests.
Then maybe for the centralized exchanges on the stage, what role do you feel centralized exchanges have to play in this? Because obviously a lot of the interoperability is happening at the blockchain level itself. But you guys are ideally positioned to work with banks and to work with the governments on this sort of thing. So where do you feel you guys come in, and actually Felix as well with your platform and your on-ramp and your off-ramp, where do you come in to enable an easy to use crypto system?
I think there's two adoption curves. There's the retail adoption curve, and in terms of the off-ramps, you also need the merchant adoption curve. You need to give people a place to spend the crypto. So the merchant needs to be able to take this onto their balance sheet. They need to be able to use it as part of their working capital. They need to be able to pay debtors, creditors, and buy inventory. I think that's the missing link. If you look at countries like Zimbabwe that works on a dollar system, that is mostly dollar cash, we'd like to see that type of thing be mobile enabled. And I think once you get the merchant on top of that, then I think the adoption curve will accelerate.
I think centralized exchanges play an integral role in the maintaining the cryptocurrency industry. That is from a liquidity perspective. Without a centralized exchange, building up a critical pool of liquidity that will enable payments, to flow on crypto rails, that will enable individuals and corporates to invest in crypto, to put crypto on the balance sheet. It will be very difficult, right? So I think firstly, from a liquidity perspective, centralized exchange, critical. Also the ease of access. I think if you look at countries like South Africa, Nigeria, perhaps not Kenya, it's relatively easy for the average person to Google and find a safe place to buy crypto. Anywhere beyond those countries, it becomes increasingly difficult. Yes, Binance, for example, enable you to buy crypto in, I think, every country across Africa, but it's not that straightforward. It's not that easy, right? Because you transact with another individual as opposed to transacting with a central counterparty. So we are still very, very early in this adoption curve. We think that we have not really even touched on the early mass market. So it's still, all of us sitting here, I would say, are early adopters, right? So I think centralized exchanges play a really critical role in giving the public that first experience with crypto in a safe and easy manner, and for us to reach a point where we have critical mass of people that own crypto, that will then make it easier for people to transact in crypto. I think centralized exchanges will continue to play a leading role in achieving that point.
Okay, perfect. And Felix?
Yes, our role is really on the on-ramp, off-ramp aspects. And, Africa's payment system is fragmented. We have mobile money countries like Kenya and Ghana. We have cash markets like Nigeria. We have bank markets like, South Africa. If you're a protocol or a Web3 company today trying to connect to payment, local payment channels in Africa can be kind of a nightmare. So we offer different kinds of solutions depending on the situation. One is a wallet, which is an SMS-based wallet, mostly for low-income workers, for refugees and so on, and mostly focused on mobile money markets. It's mostly used by humanitarian organizations. So the solution there is more of a wallet that works on the ground for onboarding. And then we also give APIs to businesses, exchanges, NFT marketplaces, that kind of thing. And finally, we also have a stablecoin settlement solution for businesses on the continent. So when you're talking about on-ramp, off-ramp, it's actually a very broad number of things that you can do as an on-ramp, off-ramp out there. In terms of roles for example, centralized exchanges, I think they play an important role in bringing liquidity to local markets. They play an important role as the first place where people will usually interact with these particular assets. And to your earlier question, when you think about adoption, it's a mixture of all these things. So correct onboarding, focus on the user, having regulated centralized exchanges and virtual asset service providers like Kotani Pay, and then also focusing on making these things as stable as possible from a regulation perspective.
And just last question on this before we move on to legislation, and you knew we were getting here. And that I'm going to go to Kevin, because obviously you've been very involved with the NEAR protocol. We've asked about the exchanges. So how do you feel that the protocols and the chains have to evolve to allow for mass adoption?
So what was it?
To evolve to be able to allow interoperability for mass adoption. What do you think needs to happen from a chain perspective?
Yeah, another really important question. And a lot has to be based out of the region and the demands and needs that they find eventually. So if, like, our example was that, of course, the chain has been built outside and the users in mind were not necessarily, yes, global users, but that's too vague. So sometimes there's a lot of assumptions in terms of the experience of onboarding and the retention, right? So these are two key points I think a lot of protocols can think about, is how easy is it for people to get into the ecosystem, and how long do they stay?
Yes.
And we've done a lot of tests where we've done hackathons. It's fantastic, great marketing. Everybody gets pumped up and excited. And then you find out 3 months later on GitHub that there's no smart contract that's being deployed at all. And so, yeah, we never measured that as a success metric. But you also have health side post metrics as well, in terms of like, are you heading to the right direction? And I think protocols have a lot of work to still do that, in terms of like, how well do you retain your developers, and how well do you retain your leaders, community, and your hubs, and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's something that we've been working a lot on for years, and that's two reasons.
Okay, perfect. I think you bring up a good point in that it's not just about getting them on board, it's keeping them. And which brings me actually to El Salvador and also to the Central African Republic. Now, they are the first 2 countries globally who have adopted Bitcoin as an alternate tender. So you can use it as real money in the shops. And that is officially mandated by the government. Now, El Salvador within months went to something like 70% of the population having a Bitcoin wallet, when only about 30% of the population were banked. But move forward a few months and not that many people were still using their Bitcoin wallets. And a lot of that has to do with the crypto crash and crypto winter, the economic climate. But I suppose my question becomes, once we get through crypto winter, and I believe the weather forecast by one of our other panelists was that winter's going to last a while, but once that starts going up again, and especially because we've seen the potential flaw in stablecoins not necessarily being that stable, is Bitcoin going to be back on the table for countries to adopt as a secondary currency? Or do you think they're going to stick with either a stablecoin or a central bank currency? No one wants to commit to this answer.
I think you'll always need to have that reference to the dollar, unfortunately. It is the global reserve currency. If you look at the foreign exchange markets, it all references back to the dollar. So for that reason, we always going to need a stable coin. I think at Binance, we've also announced that we're going to look at Euro stable coins and maybe some others. But you need that point of reference. And I think, yeah, if you're someone in El Salvador who pays in Bitcoin, you continue to need to adjust the prices on your menu of your restaurant. So what was 0.4 Bitcoin today is 0.5 Bitcoin tomorrow, etc., etc. That becomes uncomfortable. You just got to make sure you're able to let the population manage it, but you still need that central point of reference.
Okay. Marius, from what you said in your first comment, sounds like you might have a different thought about this.
So I think up until now, we've had crypto adoption grow from a grassroots level. So people that either needed crypto for a specific reason because it provided them with a better alternative to the current system, which is fiat currency. Or there's also the greed part, people that purchase crypto because they took a bet that the price will go up. So we've had tremendous adoption without governments like El Salvador or Central African Republic pushing crypto Bitcoin down on the public from a top-down approach. So although and although 70% of El Salvadorians owned or had a crypto wallet, it's likely that probably most of them didn't understand it, didn't get it, they didn't really have an incentive to use it. So I think it will take many years, if not decades, for residents in those countries to start seeing value or finding value in using Bitcoin as opposed to using the local currencies. I think initially the real push from those countries probably were from a foreign direct investment approach. So wanting to attract foreign investment into the country, wanting to establish those markets as hotspots for or favorable basis for companies to come and innovate and build crypto businesses. So I think it will take time. Interesting also some of these markets, the way, for example, Central African Republic have done this. I think in future also 10 years or so, you could start seeing a situation where neighboring countries also start to declare Bitcoin as legal tender, and then you could revisit the a situation where Bitcoin could become a regional currency, or it could even become a common currency across the African Union. So those are the long-term prospects, I think.
For sure. And now that brings us to legislation, which is a very interesting one in this space. Now, as I mentioned previously in one of my questions, have you ever wondered why it's so expensive to send money overseas? You might also notice that you've got to do a SARS declaration when you are sending money overseas. You've got a certain amount you can send every year. But when you're sending cryptocurrency, even if it's a stable coin, yes, you're supposed to declare it to SARS here in South Africa or to your revenue service, but you can do it instantly. There's not that immediate record. And theoretically in the system, we're identified by wallets. We're not yet identified by this wallet is Alex Pryor, except that I've linked mine to my alexpryor.eth address. But, you're not able to track it as easily. So where does the legislation come in? And if I send Bitcoin to a country that has banned Bitcoin, am I going to be sending you to jail? Or are they going to be asking the South African government to extradite me because I've done something illegal? How do you feel that the legislation works when you have a global set of currencies that work instantaneously virtually? But you have however many countries around the world, 194 odd countries globally, that all have different requirements and different legislations.
Felix. Your point about the speed of sending stablecoins across speaks to blockchain technology, its benefits, and why we're here today, and why it makes sense to tokenize an asset like the US dollar, put it on a blockchain, and allow for people to exchange it instantaneously and in real time. I think all regulations need to be focused more on consumer protection than anything else. We tend to have this, I don't know if it's a belief in Africa or just a behavior where we have these regulations that are meant to punish the consumer. Instead of protecting them. I think the approach should always be to things like the stability of stablecoins, for example, so that if I say, and I promise you that this stablecoin USDC is back to the dollar 1 what is the backing that you have for that, right? So those are some of the things I know, at least in the very developed markets, protections are going towards regulating stablecoin issuers, regulating exchanges, which is basically where we go and buy our crypto assets, regulating on-ramp, off-ramp partners like, Kotani, so that then they can provide efficient rails for people to interact with these assets. And then also educating the users and letting the users know that, there's no recourse, for example, in the case of some of these very volatile crypto assets. I think the regulation focused on consumer protection tends to have better results than one which is meant to punish industry participants, because you do a blanket ban like we have seen in many countries in North Africa. But like McKinsey was showing us yesterday, those are some of the highest countries in terms of, the adoption of these particular assets. So regulation should be more focused on consumer protection.
Just to answer on that, this is why you need people like Felix and Kotani Pay to have ongoing conversations with regulators, because there's a consensus where, and I'm guilty of that as well, that we think that there is going to be a messiah that will come to the door, knock on the door, open the door and say, hey, here are the rules. This is what you can do. This is what you cannot do. You stay right here. And if you go beyond that, then you'll have problems. Regulators themselves said to myself, and Felix will be able to say that, there's no messiah. Nobody's going to come and say, here are the perfect rules upon which we're going to play. So this is a massive gap that people have just thought, look, I'm going to innovate. I'm going to do my thing. You're going to do your job as a regulator. Tell me what the rules are, because I'm not going to do your job, and I'll continue. And we just do not communicate. Yet we know that consumer protection is by far the most important thing, right? I want to be able to be safe, to know that when I send my money or my stable coin across to Felix, for example, to Hangis or to Marius, that, there is an actual protection that I can fall back on. And that's why I need regulators. I mean, heck, this is why I pay my taxes for as well. It's like I want, the government to back me up on that. And so this is important to encourage companies like Kotani Pay that are actually providing on-ramp and off-ramps so that we can start exchanging digital assets across and amongst each other in a more safer way. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that. Although I'm a little bit hurt that you're not sending me cryptocurrency, but it's okay. It's
still here. I'm still here.
But I think that brings up a good point, is that corporations in particular, but people as well, like to know the rules. They want to know that they're on the right side of the rules. And if there aren't rules, that's going to slow adoption, especially from a corporate perspective. As Hannes talked about getting crypto onto the balance sheet, you'll find very few CFOs who are that comfortable with it outside of a certain sector. So I think we've probably still got quite a way to go before we start seeing the escalation of the mass adoption curve, because as you said, it's sort of been a little bit under the radar so far. We've got exactly 4 minutes and 33 seconds left. So I'm going to ask each panelist to give a sort of 30 to 45 second takeout for the audience on what they want them to take out from this conversation and what they want them to know about cryptocurrency. We'll start with Hannes, because I know you've got to do your disappearing act.
I would ask anybody. I had a breakfast this morning with a bunch of guys. They're all talking about they're going to do, and I said, so how many of you got the Luno app, the Binance app on your phone? None of them had it. I said, get the app, send each other 10 rands of Bitcoin or 10 rands of something. Just do that first trade. That enables stuff, but a lot of people want to get into the ecosystem, but they're still not active in it. So get the app, send money from Binance to Luno. Just do that first trade. Go from 0 to 1.
Yep, you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. It's okay. Okay, then let's go with Kevin. We're going to work our way out and around.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yeah. I'd say don't necessarily fall into the fear, uncertainty, and doubts. This is a special place because in the bear market, you happen to have people who actually really care about this, who stick around. So remember to think about things a bigger picture. And yeah, I'd say do what you love. That's my last wildcards.
Perfect. Imani, let's go with Felix. And we'll finish off with Marius because we started off with a bit as well.
Yeah, mine will just be to say that whether it's the cryptocurrency market, or the blockchain ecosystem, we go through these cycles where we're in winter and summer and so on. The most important thing to recognize is that not only is the space becoming bigger, right? About $8 trillion or so was transacted last year on stablecoins alone. There are a lot of developments on every side of this industry. So when you're talking about regulation, there's plenty of development there. When you're talking about technology, we're talking earlier about gas fees on Ethereum. Now the layer 2s are starting to pull some of those problems, out. So might just to say there are a lot of developments within blockchain. It's an interesting space to just keep tabs off, even if you're not willing to invest at the start.
Perfect. And Marius?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I agree with Hannes. I think you have to be curious. I think if you look at the global financial system and political landscape, the cracks are showing. I think now really is is time for cryptocurrencies, decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, to really start to get a foothold. And I think for us as all as early adopters, we have to remain curious. Open up that wallet. Don't only keep your crypto on exchange. Learn how to move your crypto into self-custody as well. That's the only way really in which you will be able to do it in the future, and to also teach other people how to do it. So yeah.
Wonderful. And seeing as I've got a last minute, I'm going to add my final thought for today, which is really that as early adopters, as the people who are building this industry within Africa and globally, the only way we're going to get mass adoption is when we stop dropping jargon. I'm not sure how many people in this room understand what a layer is or what chain is, but the fact of the matter is you don't need to know. You need to know what it can do for you and why it's important to you. You don't need to know how it works under the covers any more than you need to know how your smartphone works or how an app works. So I think that one of the big changes we need to see mass adoption is to change the way we talk about this technology, because technology is super cool. But people don't understand it, and you lose them within a minute of when you're talking to them. So I think the more we change how we talk about crypto, how we talk about Web3, blockchain projects, even the metaverse, extended reality, artificial intelligence, all emerging technologies, the more we can take it down into an understandable format for the average person on the street, the quicker we're going to see that adoption curve actually taking place. So gentlemen, thank you so much. Your knowledge has been... It's been a privilege to have you here and to get your thoughts and your knowledge on this subject. I personally agree with Kevin that Africa is well placed to lead the charge with the adoption of cryptocurrency because, hey, we've been doing it for longer than Bitcoin's been around. So with exactly 7 seconds to go, I thank you all. Fifi is right over there waiting for us. If you have any questions, please find us in the break. But as I say, unfortunately, the unknown central exchange will not be around today, but we thank you nonetheless.
Thank you.